Hi, this is Kent Lee, and today we are going to talk about English phonetics and phonology, mainly the sounds of English. We have phonemes. A phoneme is a distinctive sound in a language, a sound that is distinctive so that if you change it, it's a different word or it's nonsense. So for example, pat, bat, those are minimal pairs, and those show that the P and B contrast with each other. They make different words. If you change the sound, it changes the words. Pat, bat, or fat, vat. Those are minimal pairs showing F and V are distinct sounds. Those are phonemes. Now a phoneme has different allophones. And for example, the P allophone in English can have a hard P and a soft P. And a hard P or aspirated P has a puff of air. Puff, like pat. Or I could say a soft P, which is in that position not so common, pat, pat, but it would still be understood as pat. Or pepper. In pepper, pepper, the first P is P, has a puff of air. The second one has no puff of air, pepper, soft P. Those are allophones. An allophone is a variant in a particular context. And each sound has lots of different allophones because each sound is really kind of influenced by the sound before and after it. So there are lots of allophones, but we don't need to talk about extremely tiny variations and such. We will talk about some of the major allophones, those, for example, that vary according to dialect today. So when we talk about the consonants of English, we need to talk about voicing, place of articulation, and manner of articulation. So voicing is the vibration that comes from here. If you say s, put your hand on your throat, s, you don't feel anything. If you say z, z, a z sound, z, s, z, z, on z you feel the voicing, the vibration. It's called voicing. The glottis or the vocal cords are vibrating. You can let there are a couple of flaps of tissue and you can keep them apart like this for s, or you can bring them together and cause the air stream to set them into fast vibration, z, z. So this is z sound. And actually S and Z are very similar. The only difference is the voicing. Everything else about S and Z are the same. They only differ in terms of voicing. Manner of articulation is how the sound is articulated. What do your vocal organs do to the airstream as the air is coming out? For s, I'm creating a little constriction, a few millimeters of stricture in the vocal tract, and the air is being forced through a narrow gap, a narrow opening. It's creating friction. So those are called fricatives. I can also stop the air, p, and that's a stop or plosive consonant, p, like p and b. Okay. So we have fricatives and we have stops, and we'll have some others in a minute. Then there is place of articulation, p, b, I'm using both lips, p, p, f and v, f, I'm using lips and teeth. That's place of articulation. So we distinguish English consonants and consonant phonemes by voicing, manner of articulation, place of articulation. Those are the three key features of English phoneme consonants. So let's start with the stop consonants going from front to back. We have the P and the B. So you see in the chart you have a lot of pairs, consonant pairs in some of the cells. Those are voiced, voiceless pairs, or in this case, the voiceless ones are on the left and the voiced ones on the right. Pa, ba. So voiceless, voiced pairs. Pa, ba. Those are bilabial or labial, using both lips. Stop the airflow momentarily, then release the air. Pa, ba, pepper. Now, at the end of a word, those sounds may not be released. Those are allophones where you don't release the air, like tap, pop. Okay, at the end it's not released. The next stops, or plosive sounds, are alveolar in English. The T and the D, ta, da, ta, da. tad, dad, for example, ta, da. Then the next stops are velars. So in the back of your mouth, the back of the tongue kind of raises up and touches the velum, or the back of the mouth. So the velum is that. Alright, so the soft tissue way back there. The back of the tongue is raising towards the velum, and it's blocking the airflow. K, g, the K and G. K, g. You can also create a stop with your glottis, although this is not a phoneme in English. I'm not aware of any dialects where it is a phoneme, but it's an interesting allophone that we have, a glottal stop. So it does occur in English as an allophone, and it sometimes makes certain interjections more expressive. So I can say ow or ow. So the difference, ow, ow. The second one is more expressive, more emotive. Ah or ah, ah. So ah or ah, the second one. With practice, it is possible to do a glottal stop by itself, like, but it's not really a normal sound in English. So those are the stop consonants. Then we have fricative consonants. So I'm doing the 2 rows down. Fricatives are friction sounds. Couple of vocal organs come together and air is forced through a narrow passageway. So the first 2 are the F and the V, with the lips and teeth. Not hard. The V is just a voiced F. The next 2 are a little tricky for a lot of learners of English. They needn't be, although it's understandable because these 2 sounds are not so common in the world's languages. These are the dental fricatives. So for the TH sound, these are the TH sounds. You don't need to stick your tongue out like a lizard, as some of you might have been taught. These are relatively light, soft sounds because it doesn't create a lot of friction. It's basically your tongue tip touching the back of the front teeth and also some of the alveolar ridge, but it's touching the teeth. So these are dental fricatives. So the voiceless one is, and the voice one is, so voiceless, like thick and thin, and like in thee, this, that, these, those, thy. That's the voiced one. These sounds are relatively soft. They don't have a lot of volume, and that's one way you can distinguish them when you're listening to English over a bad telephone, or if English is not your first language and you struggle with these kinds of sounds. Relatively soft sounds. Not that hard to make. It's just the tongue tip behind the front teeth. Next we have the S and the Z. These are alveolars, so like the T and the D, these are alveolars. The alveolar is right here. So ta, da, and then the fricatives, z, z. So some Asians, especially older ones who are never taught properly, have trouble with the Z, and for example, they may say j, and it's not. There's no touching, no contact with the tongue. It's just friction. Z. It's exactly the same as the S, but with voicing. That's the only difference between S and Z. Everything else here is exactly the same. Z is not a hard sound, but it's just that in the past, East Asian English teaching didn't really focus on pronunciation, and older students were not taught properly. Not their fault if they have trouble with the sound. It's just that they were never taught properly. Bend the tongue back a little bit more, post-alveolar, behind the alveolar ridge, okay, here, and you get the sh and the zh, sh, zh. The voiceless sh, that's the sh sound, like in she and sheep, and the zh, that's less common in English. It occurs in some words from French, like beige and garage, and in some words from Latin with the S-I-O-N ending, for example, like vision, decision, television, ja. Okay, it's not too hard. It's just the tongue is bent up. These differ from the Korean equivalents, where in Korean, like the shi and the and such, these sounds have a flat tongue, like the Korean shi versus English she, where your tongue is bent up like this, curled up. There is a velar fricative. This occurs in some dialects of English. It's not a regular phoneme. The velar fricative is the friction sound with the velum back here, the same place where you make a k, g. This is not touching, and you make a h, h. So for example, in Scottish, like loch in Scottish dialects, but not a standard sound in English. If you know Spanish, it's like the h in jalapeno. Finally, there's a glottal fricative, the H sound, h. Very easy, h. It's just friction through the glottis, h. No vibration. Then there are a couple of phonemes in English that are a combination of a stop plus fricative together, but they are considered a single phoneme. So the ch, it's like a blend of a t and a sh, but it's all one single sound. It's considered a phoneme. Ch, like in cheese. And that is distinct from other phonemes. We consider it a single sound. It's an affricate sound, it's called. Likewise, the voice one, j, like in judge. And again, these are with the tongue bent up, like ch, j. Unlike their analogs in Korean and Japanese and Chinese, where your tongue is flat. So compare English, cheetah, and the Korean cheetah. In Korean, your tongue is flat for ji and chi. J, ch, j, ch. So, but English, j, ch. So it's judge, not judgy, and cheese, not cheese, like in Korean. They're different. Next we'll do the top row, nasal sounds. So for these nasal consonants, the velum kind of moves, partly open, so that air can go up through the nose, and air is released through the nose, and it's usually voiced too in English. So that's the manner of articulation, nasal sounds, and we have the labial nasal, the m, like in me. We have the alveolar, the n, na, like no, and we have the velar, like as in sing and think. And in English, this can only come at the end of a syllable. You can't start a word with like you can in some languages. You can say ngo in some languages, but not in English or Korean. You can only be at the end of a syllable or word. Next, we have a couple of approximate or glide sounds. And the trickiest one is that post-alveolar approximate, the English R. Now the proper IPA symbol is an upside down R, but if your books use the regular R, that's okay. But for phonetics and phonology, we tend to use the upside down R. One famous dictionary writer in English called it the doggy sound. It sounds like a grr, like a dog going grr, grr. And that's how you can maybe practice it, grr, rrr, rrr. So for these glide sounds, the tongue moves just a tiny bit and air flows around the tongue. And that's where the sound comes from. There's no friction, no contact or anything. It's just air moving around the tongue. R. And then more palatal, y, like in yes. That's pretty easy. IPA uses the letter J for it because that's the spelling in European language, many European languages, y. Then there is the velar w. And it's actually a labial velar because you're using the velum. The velum is moving. The back of the tongue is moving kind of toward the velum. And you're also moving your lips to wa. Now, in some varieties of English, there is a voiceless version, a hua. And this used to be a common phoneme in English. When you say WH in English spelling, like what, that was a voiceless W. That has disappeared from standard English. It still exists in some dialects in New England and the UK, but it's pretty much disappeared, but it's preserved in the WH spelling. You don't need to say what unless you want to sound really overly formal. What and what. But nobody says hua anymore, really. Not many people. We have one lateral sound in English, so it's sort of like a glide or proximant, except that it's touching. The tongue tip touches the alveolar area and air flows around the tongue. La, la. Okay. Pretty easy. A couple of interesting allophones. So there's a trill R in some dialects instead of the glide R, R. In some dialects like Scottish and Irish English, you might hear a ra, red, and such, if you want to sound Irish or Scottish. Then there's this sort of tap allophone of T. It's an alveolar, post-alveolar tap. It sounds sort of like a D. It's an allophone of T in North American English. So in British English, you would say butter, butter, a soft T there. But in American English, we say butter, butter. And British might think that we're lazy. It's just something we do for ease of pronunciation. It's easier. Butter. It's kind of a soft tap, a one-time touch. It's kind of like the Korean real, the Japanese also. So that's an allophone in North American English. You don't need to say it, but understand whenever you hear North American English in media, you'll hear that tap T sound. It's really an alveolar, post-alveolar tap. Butter, better, better. This is an allophone that occurs in North American English before an unstressed vowel. So you have a T between two vowels, and the vowel after the T is not stressed, like butter and better. It often becomes this tap T. It sounds sort of like a D. So again, one last note. Not only do you have this sort of, the soft T in American English becomes this sort of tap before unstressed vowels. Likewise, the P and the K before unstressed vowels, they don't change a lot. It's just that they're the unaspirated kind, like the second P in pepper, pepper. The second P, it doesn't have that puff of air. It's a soft or unaspirated P. So aspirated is the P, that first one, before stressed vowel. So in English, P, T, K, P or T or K, before a stressed vowel, a stressed syllable, have this puff of air, this aspiration. Pepper, toy, and kite. But before an unstressed vowel, they become unaspirated. So like the K in ticker, ticker, or the P in pepper, or the T in butter, British, or butter, American English. Okay, so now let's move on to the English vowels. And the English vowel system is interesting and kind of complicated. Later on, we'll talk about why that is. There's an interesting history behind it. It's very complex. So we can talk about vowels as being front, is that they tend to be pronounced more at the front of the mouth, using mainly the front part of the tongue. And then we have vowels that are at the back of the mouth that involve more of the back of the tongue. There are also a couple of vowels that are kind of in the middle. And we talk about vowels as being closed or high, where the jaw is relatively closed, or open, like that. And we have long vowels and short vowels. Now the thing about short vowels in English is they're short because the tongue is relaxed. So the tongue is a muscle. If you've ever eaten cow tongue, it's like steak, but it's very kind of chewy, very interesting texture. It's a muscle. Your tongue is just one big muscle, and it can be tensed or relaxed. So the long vowels in English are long partly because they are tensed, and they're held longer because they're tensed. The short vowels in English are short because the tongue is relaxed, and that changes not only how long the vowel is, but also it changes the vowel quality. It can become a different vowel. So if you compare the vowels in beat and bit, these are at the front of the mouth, they're high. The E, your tongue is tensed. It's pretty much as far out and as high as it would naturally go, E, and that's a long vowel in English. You relax it and you get I, bit. And this is an important distinction in English. There are a lot of words that are distinguished by this contrast, beat, bit, meet, mit. The short vowel, I, the tongue is relaxed, and therefore it's a little bit lower, and it is not sticking out quite as much, not quite as forward. And so the quality is different. It's an entirely different vowel sound. It's not just a short clipped version of E, it's a different sound altogether. E, I. Now the long distinction in English is important. So an E in English, like in ki, it's longer than the ki in Korean, ki. Because the short, long distinction is important in English. So ki and kid, need, lead, lid. So there's a difference in the quality of the vowel as well as the length. Next you have the A sound. Now in English we don't have a pure A, except in maybe Scottish dialects. In a lot of languages there's a pure A, a long or tense A sound. But in English, it became this sort of diphthong. It glides into sort of an E, A. So that's important. Bacon. It's not bacon, but bacon. It's an A. It's a glide. And that's a really important thing about English. This English vowel, A. It's a glide. So it's a diphthong or a double vowel. So the E and I, those are considered monophthongs or simple vowels. But the A, it's really like phonetically two vowel sounds together, but it's considered one phoneme. It is a distinctive single sound. It's just an A that got glided. A, historical processes that happened several hundred years ago. So that is heard as a distinct vowel, A. And bait is different from, say, bit and beat. Then going lower, if you kind of lower your jaw, bait, lower it more to bed, and that's a short vowel, bed. That's pretty easy vowel, occurs in most languages of the world that I know of, so you probably know how to say bed. Bad, that lower vowel, a, is a little hard for some. In Korean you get an allophone that's pretty close to it in the word mammy, where the two M's kind of pull the jaw and pull the vowel down. So your jaw is down like bad, a bad bed, bad. Bad and bed are different. Those are minimal pairs. Jaw is low. Let's go through the back vowels. In the back of the mouth, at the very top, back of the tongue is high up and tense. You get ooh, food, food. Now, if you relax the tongue comes down a bit and then it's not quite as back, and you get the like in book. And this is not as common a vowel in English, so if you make mistakes, it's maybe more forgivable or easier for people to figure out what you mean. But a good contrast, for example, is this. With the lax vowel, so it's short and lax, like look. So if my son is misbehaving, I would say, look, I'm your father. Listen to me. But if you're Darth Vader, you can say, Luke, I am your father. Ooh, so look, Luke. Luke is the long tense vowel. Look is the short lax vowel, look. Next we have the O. And in English we don't have a pure long O, like in some languages. It's glided. It's just like the A, it's glided, it's a diphthong, it's O and oo. O, O. And that's really important because otherwise it'll sound like a different vowel. O, because it'll sound like the O, which is a lower, the O, like in bought. It makes a difference between saying I bought a boat, long O, boat, or I bought a bot, like a robot. It's different. And that's an important contrast in English. The O, the short O, like in bought, and the O is in boat. The O is really common in English. The O looks like a backwards C, O. That vowel is even more common in British dialects. Now, if you unround your lips, it becomes an looks like a little upside down V, like in hut. And That's also like the in Korean, although in Korean and in British English your lips are a little bit more rounded. In American English your lips are a bit more unrounded. Hut, hut. This is a short vowel, and as a short vowel it occurs in stressed syllables like hut and butter. And that is different from the schwa. So in the center of the mouth, you got a couple of central vowels. So the upside down E, we call it the schwa. That's the name of the letter. The name of the letter is from Hebrew because it's an important sound in the Hebrew language. So that central vowel, the schwa, is a reduced vowel. It's extra short. It only occurs in unstressed syllables in English. So the schwa sounds a lot like the like in hut, except that this hut, it occurs in stressed syllables or stressed vowels, and it's a short vowel, hut. The schwa occurs in unstressed syllables like the, so like the hut. They're very similar, very hard to hear the difference, and it doesn't matter. What matters is the schwa is extra short. You pronounce it extra short, extra light, like about, the hut. Okay, it's extra short. Then there's a central vowel, looks like a little 3, and that's more of an sound, like in bird, So it's kind of it's like a schwa, but it's a little lower and it's more colored. And this one can occur in stressed syllables like bird, but the schwa is unstressed, like the bird, the bird. Schwa is extra short. It's so short that if you are an Asian person learning English, for example, you may have trouble hearing words like the and a bird, with a schwa, because it's so fast, it's so extra short and light. So you got bird, and now last on the bottom row we have these ah sounds. So there's the one that looks sort of like an alpha ah. That's your regular ah, like in father, ah, and hot in American English. For some speakers, there's an allophone where it's kind of more to the front, like Dana. That's certain speakers, especially before an N, like maybe some Scottish dialects. Don't worry about that. The ah, the regular alpha style ah, that's the regular ah in American and British English, like in hot and father. In British dialects, you've got a rounded version of, it's a reverse alpha, like bottle, bottle. So it's just like ah, but with the lips rounded, bottle. If you've got a bottle of water and such. So that's an allophone you can learn if you want to learn certain British dialects. So that's the vowels of English. Again, we have kind of short vowels that are lax, like bit and bed and bad and hut and book. Then we have long vowels like E and U, and that also includes the glided vowels A and O. Those are glided vowels, and it's important that those are long and glided. A, O. You may have to practice by exaggerating them if you're not used to these kinds of vowels. Those are the vowels of English, and if you want more vowels, well, you can play with lip rounding. You can take the front vowels and round your lips and get some nifty vowels like in European languages, like U and E, or you can take the U and unround it and you get the U like in Korean and Japanese, and so on. And you can have fun with that stuff. Okay, well that's it for the vowels, and that's it for the main English phonemes. Someday I might make more videos where I go through more of the symbols, more of the sounds that are that exist in other languages that don't exist in English some other time. All right, thank you for watching, and see you later.